Hey, it's Mark Strigl, and it is an honor and privilege to once again connect with a guy I've spoken to many times through the years, a legendary bassist, musician, David Ellefson. How are you, sir?
Hey Mark, how are you, buddy? Doing well.
I'm great, man. As always, you have a ton of stuff going on. I want to talk right away about this new podcast that you
Yeah,
launched, which I just listened to the first episode, and I'm excited about this because you're going to be interviewing people, but it sounds like at least from the first episode, we're going to hear stories from you about your past. I mean, on
yeah,
this premiere, we hear you talking about Cliff Burton and kind of your thoughts on him and when you first formed Megadeth with an ex-member of Metallica, how the influence of Cliff was kind of upon you, and I thought that was a really cool thing. So let's just talk about what you plan to do with the new
sure.
podcast, the David Ellefson Show. If you can mention who your co-host is.
Yeah. So look, Joshua Toomey, I'd spoken with him. We've done podcasts before for Knotfest and stuff over the years, and so he scheduled a podcast interview with me, kind of leading into NAM back in January, and a lot of stuff coming up with Metal Legion show, Ellison Coffee being at NAM. So there's some talking points. So I said, yeah, sure, no problem, let's do it, and because sometimes people hit me up for interviews. I'm like, listen, I can talk for an hour about almost anything, guys like you and me. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, yeah.
is there really a need to just do another interview and talk about whatever? And so I try to be a little strategic. Like, okay, we're heading into an event. Let's kind of promote that or talk about that. So when Josh, when he hit me for initial, I was kind of like, yeah, I guess so. Leading into NAM, I guess it's okay. So we did it, and it's great to chat with him. And when we finished, as always, it's like half hour, 40 minutes. Let's try to wrap it up by then, whatever. And of course, an hour and a half later, he and I are just yucking it up and going on and on and on. And so he goes, look, I'll let you go. We'll wrap it up. And as we wrapped it up, we literally, turned off the Zoom, and he goes, or streamer or whatever it was. And he said, ever think about doing a podcast? And he said, well, I'd done a couple during COVID, like when I had my one nonprofit, we did some stuff through the Grammys at that time, had the Grammy Music Education Coalition. So we partnered with them. We did like the Jerry
Yeah.
Lewis telethon, 8 hour, Mondo thing. Of course, everybody's home. So, we could
Yeah.
talk to Alice Cooper and, whoever, because everybody's at home. I mean, you're just stuck at home with COVID. So everybody was very agreeable to it. And I'd even started one probably 4 years ago in town. Dave Pratt in Phoenix he's kind of the mayor, we call him, right? He was like kind of our Howard Stern of Phoenix radio.
Right.
So I'd done a couple of these things before, I guess is the long story short. So when he asked me, I go, well, all right. He goes, look, I can help you put it together. I said, hold that thought. I'll see you in 10 days when I get home from NAM. And so, like as always, like when you get a good song or you meet some bandmates and you want to get it started, it moves quickly, right? All of a sudden, I'm like sending him, messages about stuff and ideas. And so together, we put it together very much. He's for sure not only just a co host, he's a co creator of it for sure. And it was his idea to go, dude, you could just sit here and talk about all the history of your life and your career. And I said, well, I think what's unique about my situation is that I come from a group who was part of a genre that is one of the more storied, more talked about, more interesting genres of music. Even when we did the big four with Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax, we were the four bands that were still working, still alive, actually still being productive and hitting an uptick, at the time, what, 30 years or something after we had started our bands and our genre. And and I was thinking country doesn't have that. Reggae doesn't have that. Country doesn't have that. I just kind of went down this list of all these different jam bands, There's not four
Mhm.
big jam bands, and they
Right.
did. So I thought, and so, I think Toomey, one of the things he likes is sort of to always add this one question, like, okay, so the history lesson with David Ellefson. I think that's probably the thing he looks forward to the most is, okay, lay a zinger on me. You know what I mean? Some deep
Yeah.
dive. And, like I think in the first episode when he's asking, hey, was Ron McGovney ever considered for Megadeth? I was like, now that's a question I have never heard before,
Yeah.
never been asked, never been considered. And it would probably take a bass player like Joshua, who's a fan,
Who
who's
knows the
also
history? Yeah.
yeah, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I think, and there's kind of, I think the thing kind of ends up being two things. We sort of film the bumpers going in and out of the interview. I like interviewing guests because I talk all the time. I'd rather sit and listen to my friends talk, and they've got very interesting stories, people that we've got coming up. Musicians, different people in the industry, from labels to authors to managers to all kinds of different people who offer a very different, they offer some different colors. So it's not just me just interviewing another musician all the time. There's some people behind the scenes who have some wonderful stories and are a part of my story. And so there's always a thread there that somewhere we've sort of crossed paths and that's at least we're out of the gate. That's what it is, and who knows where it'll ultimately land as you get into it. These things, like a band, they ebb and flow and they get a life of their own.
And so we will get your history in it, which I love, and we're going to get you talking with people, doing interviews, as you mentioned. The first one is Frank Bello, a guy you've made music with, a guy you have a long history with. He, of course, is in the band Anthrax. But would you consider speaking with people outside of the metal world, or is this strictly going to be musicians and
Good question, by the way. And I think initially, just like with music, you kind of go to your comfort zone. You know what I mean? I mean, there's no reason to go out of the comfort zone. Why? Just to be uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Put my name on something and just be uncomfortable. Why do that? So I think for me, it's about friendship. It's about community. I've always been that kind of a guy to sort of be. I've been called the diplomat and the ambassador over the years, by other
yeah,
band members, and I enjoy that role. That's a cool role to have, one that
absolutely.
bring people together, help them feel comfortable, and listen to their life, because as we do the ins and outs, kind of the bumper in and out of every episode, Josh and I end up sitting around kind of bullshitting a little bit, and that almost becomes an entire episode on its own,
Yeah, yeah.
And so, these things can get quite lengthy. So I think we've probably got an incredible amount of content. I mean, look, we just started this thing right after NAMM. So like late January, maybe first week of February, we hit the ground running, knowing I was going to be coming here to Europe to get started on the Bass Warrior tour. I had a bit of a deadline. I said, look, we got these 3.5 weeks where we can, let's if we're going to do it, let's hit it ground running now. Let's get some content. Let's talk to
Cool.
some friends and do it. So we've got a lot of stuff already done and in the can. And it really became, this is a labor of love. I know you can sort of get sponsors and do all kinds of stuff with it and make some
Yeah,
money with it and whatever, that's always nice too, but that is not the goal.
yeah.
Was to yet start another thing and try to figure out how to make that profitable. To me the profit is in the people. It's
Absolutely. And I think that's a great attitude, not only for you, but for anyone going into podcasting. It's all about the passion first and foremost. Um, I encourage everyone to subscribe, to follow on the different platforms where you can get the David Ellefson show. I know I did so on Apple Podcasts. Frank Bello, the first guest. Can you name any? I don't. I want to put you on the spot, but are you allowed to mention any of the upcoming guests yet, or
not yet.
not yet? Okay,
Not
fair
yet.
enough.
And it's part of it too. We have the Patreon. That it's funny. I set the Patreon up back during COVID. Because it's a lot of people were using them and stuff, and it just seemed like too much work for me. You know what I mean? So we set it up. Because Josh said, look, we can use that as a way to sort of build a community as well. You know, one of the things that I wanted to launch along with this was this David Ellefson Bass Coalition. And, you know, in a way, the podcast kind of sits inside of the coalition. Now, what's the coalition? I'll get back to you because I'm kind of figuring it out. I'm kind of making it up as we go. You know, I want it to be inclusive, not, you know, not just for guys that have 4 or 5 strings, but for anyone a fan of the low end musicians in general. And, you know, I've always thought about kind of having a music academy, sort of a recording academy. You know, I've kicked around the idea of doing some bass camps of sorts, you know, and nothing's more boring than a bunch of bass players sitting around the campfire sounding like popcorn. You know what I mean? So, right. You know, believe me, as a bass player, that's freaking boring. You know what I mean? So, you know, as a bass player, we have a role. Our role is to add to the bigger, greater sum of a song. You know what I mean? So it's not so much about that. But it is part of, you know, community building, you know, and, you know, because I've often thought, what is the history of stringed instruments? Does anybody care? I mean, if your mindset can only handle 15 seconds of a TikTok video, how the hell are you ever going to have the discipline to learn to play an instrument or do these other things that so many of us had to do, you know? Yeah. And look, the world changes, you know, I'm not crying about it, but it's just like kind of thing, well, all right. I mean, hey, DJs can be a part of it. You know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of low end in DJs. Why not have them part of the bass coalition? You know what I mean? So to me, it's kind of more of a community. You know, when I'm at NAMM with the Ellefson Coffee booth, you know, I've got, you know, bass players come to my booth from Kip Winger to Paulo from Sepultura to, you know, just the gang, right? Because we're, you know, that's kind of our tribe, you know? So, yeah, the show doesn't necessarily need to be metal in nature all the time, even though that's my family, that's my community. And, you know, the coalition is really, again, to me at this point, everything's about community now, you know? There's so much divisiveness in the world. We're watching it right in real time in front of us. Believe me, I'm over here on this side of the world. There's a lot of stuff's happening back.
You're in Germany now, David?
Yeah. And I'm heading down to Rome tomorrow to get started with my rehearsals and on the tour. And so, you know, I get to see a lot, you know, and I've learned to sort of just kind of close my mouth, open my ears and my eyes, be an observer, do a lot of looking and listening and just sort of absorbing all of it. You know, and it's one of the beauties of being a world traveler. I already wrote a couple lyrics for the next Dieth record while I was here. I sent them over to the guys, you know what I mean? So when I'm traveling and I'm moving, just so happens this was the t-shirt that came up in my suitcase today. But it's funny that, you know, when I'm moving and I'm traveling and I'm, you know, just moving is an inspiration for me. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think what you're saying there is so important because you can choose to focus on the things that are divisive, or you can choose to focus on the things that bring us together, like music, for example. And I think I like to choose the latter myself. You know, I think it's.
I mean, you know what it's like when you interview. You got a guest on your show. You're chatting and everything. You know, all of a sudden, it's kind of like the issues of the world just kind of melt away. And that I always liked that about music. I mean, that's why I was such a big Kiss fan. And they were very clear in their mission. Hey, we want you to forget about all that shit. You know what I mean? Come to the show. And, you know, obviously being in a band who had songs those were some often the topics, you know, of this, you know, holy wars and peace cells and, you know, all this kind of stuff. At the same time, you know, I think what people will always unite over is anarchy or sort of standing up to the man, whoever the man is, whatever the man is, you know, this sort of authoritarian governing sort of, you know, feeling over us, you know, and I think anytime we get in the room and we're playing music, we're talking music, we're just doing that, suddenly, you know, that feeling of that control, it just kind of goes away because you realize it's an illusion of control. It's not even real, you know what I mean? So it's more about letting our love of music, our passion to talk about the journeys we've had together. Like I said, you and I have chatted a few times, but
Yes.
the fact that you got a Scorpion shirt on, I immediately know you're fucking cool. You know what I mean? Not a big
Well,
game. So you know
thanks.
what I mean? And
Thanks.
especially an in trance shirt. Come on, like the Uli days. Come on, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so to me, that sometimes that's I mean, that kind of sums it all up, man. It's like
Right.
you're part of the cool t-shirt crowd, if you
Right.
come on
There's a
the
connection
podcast.
there with the
Yeah, that's
t-shirts. Yeah.
cool t-shirt coalition. Maybe that's what I should have called this thing now.
Thank you. Right. David, again, we want to encourage everyone to get on the podcast, follow it, subscribe to it. The David Ellefson Show is the official
That's it.
title, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
asked Josh, I said, what do we call it? He goes, I want just the David Olson show. I said, yeah, I guess just state the obvious, right? Okay,
Right.
that's.
Right on. And I truly enjoyed the first episode. I do want to talk to you about what's going on now for you musically,
Mhm.
but I got to get in one fanboy Megadeth question.
Sure, of course.
A group that I've been following since the 80s, big fan. What, in your opinion, as somebody who was there for the entire decade of the 90s, why did that era of the band, that lineup of the band, last longer than any other lineup throughout the history of Megadeth?
Couple things. One, there was an understood mission that we had to be clean, right? That the days of the 80s that had to die, that sort of it just had to, and I know that goes very contrary to all cool things in rock and roll and all that kind of stuff, but it had to. We just had to. It was time to sort of grow up and start behaving and treating our business, our bands, running it like that. We had great management. We had two different managers during that period. Ron Lafitte, who I give just all the props to. He helped me get sober back in 1990, 89 into 90. He really masterminded and put the band back together for Rust in Peace, which then of course carried through Euthanasia. He was an incredible networker. He told me a great thing. He said, went to his management office one day over in Sherman Oaks, and we were just talking, and he said to me, he goes, David, always invest in yourself because you're going to be the best investment you ever make. And I was like, boom. And we were
Wow.
literally
Yeah.
just texting this week, and I told
Oh,
him, I go,
cool.
dude, you told me this. You probably don't remember, but he goes, man, because I was telling him what I'm up to. He goes, man, you're busy. And I said, well, you always said invest in myself. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing. That's all it is. It's just putting some deposits in the David Ellison bank. By just traveling, working out, doing stuff. So I think it was that, and certainly going into the Cryptic Writings record, it was another management regime. Out of the two records we had with them, Cryptic Writings and Risk, Cryptic was for sure super successful. Creatively, it was a great kind of reinvention of the band, which we had to do, in order to stay competitive, because it is a business, and yet you're the reason the business exists is because of the music. So the music has to always lead the way, and so I think that record for sure we really hit the bullseye, with creating, we crafted a very masterful record that kind of checked all the boxes of being a cool Megadeth record, a forward thinking record, and something that then, could, open the new doors at radio, which was what the competition was. I mean, if you think about the 90s, more than anybody in radio, it was the radio rock era. I mean, that was it if there ever was one, active rock and all this stuff.
And it's interesting with Megadeth, something that's always kind of stuck out in my mind. You guys were a metal band in the early 90s when so many um, other groups were kind of running from that tag. They were, going grunge. The grunge bands were coming up. They were all over MTV. But Megadeth is one of the few bands, specific, just talking about MTV right now, where you guys actually kind of stuck to your guns and you were all over MTV. It wasn't just the Headbangers Ball. I mean, there were videos in prime time or, main viewing hours by Megadeth at that period in history when there really wasn't a ton of metal being featured.
Yeah, and you know, I'll add a third thing to that. So,
Please.
and that is, I think we had a lineup that we felt very comfortable with. Everybody had a different role in it, but everybody, I think of like a successful team that wins the game. Everybody stays in their lane, and when the moment of impact needs to happen, it happens. The guy that scores the 3 pointers, he hits the bucket time after time after time.
Yeah.
The songwriting was at the top of its game, and having that feeling, there was a brotherhood feeling there. We had each other's back. When anyone was having a problem, we came to the table and we fixed it. We sat down like a team. Again, around the feet, he loved Pat Riley, who was the coach of the Lakers at that time, and he studied Pat, and he brought Pat Riley's mindset into band meetings. I remember when we were
Wow.
strategically putting together the Countdown to Extinction record.
Right.
We had this big reset. Everybody went through the Rust in Peace tour. We stayed sober. We cleaned up all of our debts, our personal debts, our corporate debts. We came home and we split up a merch check after the Clash of the Titans. And I finally paid off the last, kind of made my financial amends, paid off the last of my debts and had a little extra money. And so as we went into the Countdown to Extinction campaign, we were free and clear. So we had a nice windfall and we were able to, buy cars and houses and live
Yeah.
like civilized adults now, not just a bunch of street urchins, hand to mouth anymore. And that was very esteeming, to do that. And as we sat there, I remember Ron said, he goes, okay, so now we're at Dave's house. And we're sitting there in his living room, and Ron just looked at us. He said, okay, we've done really well. Now everybody's got to step up their game. Everybody in this room, and myself included, we all have to step up our game now because we're here. This is ours to have. We can do it. And, just going down the checklist, so, to be managed well. I mean, look at Iron Maiden. They've had the same manager, Rod Smallwood, from the beginning. Metallica, when they got, Q Prime involved,
Yeah.
and they've been managed. So I look at that, I go, great. And even, our friend Larry Mazer came in to manage us during the what became Rude Awakening campaign, and before the group disbanded in 2002. And he even said, he goes, success is built on two things: great songs and aggressive management. Because things have to be managed well. They just do. And on that level, on the business side, it's not music friends, it's music business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that really has to be taken care of. And so there's and that's chemistry. That's all. The Beatles, that it just happened. Brian Epstein and EMI. I mean, think about
Yeah.
it. The Beatles. I hate to say this, and I'll get slaughtered for saying it, but it's almost like they were the first boy band. They
Yeah.
were out kicking ass, working the clubs, doing their shit, and then when they got in the hands of EMI and the production and the management, it's like, hey, we're going this way, and we all need to be going that way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
A
And then
collective mindset,
yeah,
a team that is all kind of sharing that same vision.
yeah. And look, and they've even talked about it in many documentaries. Then, as they got their own individualism and wives and girlfriends, and now we're going to do this, and then it fragments, and then it's over. I mean, look, they had a good run. It's not like it was
Yeah.
a bad run, but any band, any group that's going to stay together, and that's why, again, I have such great respect for for Metallica, for Iron Maiden, for these groups that have kept it together, because it isn't, you're not always going to hit the bullseye every time. You're just not. Things are going to happen. Like, nobody saw Seattle music showing up, Nirvana and Pearl Jam, and right in the middle of hair bands and guitar solos, Nirvana shows up and just shoots that in the head, and that's gone, and so a lot of careers change sometimes from things that just come from out of nowhere. Where the hell did that come from,
Yeah.
So, but you're right. I think Megadeth through the 90s, we managed to navigate, thread the needle, and it wasn't by mistake. I mean,
Right.
just it was a very, but look, that band was never formed out of just this random jam session. I mean, we used to sit in me and Dave's apartments on Sycamore Drive there in Hollywood, and everything was strategically thought out. Even our names. How do we have two Daves in the band? How does this work? Like, this has never
Yeah.
been done
Right.
before.
Do you hear from Marty Friedman at all nowadays?
Oh
Is
yeah, no,
yeah.
Marty and I talk all the time, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we just played together with Metal Allegiance at the House of Blues back in January.
Right,
So
right. That's right.
his book is fantastic, Dreaming Japanese. He did a really great job telling the Megadeth story, I think. I think he's very genuine. He's very authentic. He's not bitter, but he tells it like it really was. And I told him, I said, dude, I commend you for
Right.
having, first of all, the huevos to tell the story. And what do you care? You got nothing to lose. You're not in the band anymore. Yet you're not trying to start a war with anybody either. You do that's a very delicate thing to be, sort of diplomatic about that. And I thought he did a very good job, to speak his mind on it, yet tell the story and yet be honorable about it.
Cool. Cool. Back to the beginning, July 5th, Birmingham, England. Ozzy's farewell performance featuring Black Sabbath and a lot of other special guests, including you. I was so excited to see that you're going to be a part of what is going to be, I mean, let's face it, one of the most historic days in hard rock and metal history. But let's just talk about your history with not only being a fan of Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, but you've played many shows on the same stage with them. Any memories or thoughts on Ozzy and or Black Sabbath that you'd like to share?
So, I got to know Ozzy pretty well when we did the Megadeth Black Sabbath tour in 2014, I guess that was, across South America. And Billy Morrison was out on the road as well. So Billy and I, we just chatted yesterday, actually. He just got a new thing that he just put out, or he's, promoting, obviously, that song.
The Gods of Rock and Roll.
Gods of
Yeah,
Rock and Roll. Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
great tune. It sounds
And,
awesome.
and, and Billy and I got, it's funny, me and Al Jorgensen we were friends already. And then I asked him to sing on a Cheap Trick song off Wiedersehen on my Ellefson No Cover record during COVID. And with the idea, like, okay, he'll give you one, you give one back. So I said, man, I'd love to write a song with Al. So I go over to Al's studio in LA a couple years back, and Billy Morrison's there. I'm like, wow, check this out. Billy and that's when I got to know Billy as a guitar player, as a musician, and a fantastic guitar player and a great writer. And so me and him and Caesar from Ministry and Al and his engineer, we sat around and just threw a bunch of riffs and stuff down. And so I got a cut on the Ministry record, Moral Hygiene. It was from about 2-3 years ago that came out. Anyway, so I got to, so Billy Morrison has kind of been in my path, through a few things. So, but yeah, just getting to know Ozzy just as a gentleman, and he's just such a genuine guy. He's just kind of this nice, it's kind of like an old, he's an old soul in a way, but he's just a music fan. Is I think what I took away from it.
Yeah.
He's just kind of this, and he's not a hippie. I wouldn't call him a hippie, but he's when he grew up and his love of rock and roll back into the 60s, and just forgetting for a minute that he's Ozzy and that he's the lead singer of Black Sabbath, and just kind of listening to him talk about Randy and Mike Inez, and just kind of through all that kind of stuff, and just like a guy sitting on the couch just sitting around bullshitting about music, it's really
Yeah.
really great. So I was very honored for that, and of course Geezer and I have been friends. Tony a little bit. I don't know Bill Ward. So it'll be great to see him again. We did play, it's funny. When Ozzy went back to Black Sabbath in 1998, they played in Phoenix, where I live. They played at the time, brand new baseball stadium there where the Diamondbacks play. It was called New Year's Evil. And it
Oh,
was
wow.
on New Year's Eve. It was Sabbath, Pantera, Megadeth, Slayer, and Soulfly.
Wow.
And we
What a
performed
bill.
the show, and then we went right to Nashville right after that, and literally like a couple days after that, it started the Risk album. So it was really kind of a cool way to close the door of '98, headed into '99, and of course now Ozzy's back in Sabbath with Bill Ward. It was huge,
Yeah.
and that was the last time I saw Pantera, with Diamond Vinny, and I remember just looking down from like a box upstairs, like a box, like a suite or something, looking down just and watching the crowd just swelling all over, and I was just
Yeah.
going, you know, these guys did pretty good for themselves. I remember jamming with them at some little club on the power metal album in Dallas, and
Yeah.
watching them come up the ranks with Megadeth over the years, opening for us. And I'm going, now they're playing behind us. I'm just going, no, good job, dudes. That you guys did well, man. It was a cool vibe. So, yeah, I feel like I've had a good friendship with, Black Sabbath through Ozzy and Sharon. She had us on an Ozfest in 1998. I guess, which would have been right before that, right before Ozzy went back to
Yeah, I
Black
saw that
Sabbath.
at
Come
PNC
to
Bank
think,
Art Center.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
So
Limp Bizkit was on that one, right?
there
Yeah.
was Limp
Yeah.
Bizkit was
Yeah.
before us, Tool was after us, and then
Right.
here we are in our long hair and our stretch jeans playing Holy Wars, which is like it's a bizarre moment in time,
Right.
but yeah. So I feel like there's been it's kind of a good. It feels like a family vibe around there. You know what I mean? It really does, and I
Yeah.
and I commend Sharon for making it that way. That it's been like that, and
Yeah.
Megadeth has been a part of that, and they've been nothing but gracious, to
Yeah,
me.
and that's awesome. I mean, I was thrilled and excited for you when I saw your name on the bill there. So that's going to
Yeah,
be a great day, July 5th in Birmingham, England. Um, David, before I let you go, you are always up to so much stuff musically. Can you give us the recap maybe on what's currently happening for you as far as
sure.
bands, songwriting, and recording?
Yeah, well, we I guess came into the new year. I have this Bass Warrior tour that I'm doing here this month over here, which is my I got a group, a solo bunch of guys out of Italy. Andy Martingelli pretty much put the band together for me, and so we go out, we play stuff off the Ellefson solo records. We play obviously a couple of Megadeth songs, and of course Andy plays with me with the Ellefson Soto record that we did. So it's fun. It's fun for a month. Just come over and rock some shows, and so we got that. We have some Kings of Thrash shows. A couple of them. One of them is announced. We got a few more, and that'll be starting up in the fall. I have some stuff coming out that I'm not able to talk about yet, but in the
Okay.
next bit will be. I think probably the more immediately, aside from the podcast, is the Nick Menza film. Is finally coming out, and it's so we got the
Yeah.
trailer. We've got we've got the premieres now in Los Angeles, where we'll do a red carpet, so we can have some rocker friends and people coming out for that. And so there's stuff now. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
yet with the idea that there'll be more screenings, and then Bayview Entertainment will set a release date coming up here shortly of when it'll hits in all the various platforms and everything. But it's nice to have some box office showings coming
Sure.
up
Yeah.
now. It just kind of gives some validity to it. This is it's obviously partly Nick in Megadeth for sure, of course, but there's a lot to his life, and it's just a way to honor him and keep his legacy alive. Not that anyone would forget, that he was in
Yeah.
such a cool part of the era, part of the band. But so there's that, and look, there's a whole bunch more. I just how it is when you can announce things on the
Right.
schedule.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's a great year, man. It's an awesome life. I'm super. I wouldn't want anybody else's life of my own, and I think that's a good place to be at this point.
It is absolutely a good place to be. And for fans like myself of everything you've done, thanks for still being out there doing it, bringing us new music and keeping the legacy of what, people like you and Nick Menza have done in the past alive. I think you do a great job. And I'm just psyched. You got a new podcast. I'm a subscriber. I will be listening. The David
Yeah,
Ellefson Show.
thank you, appreciate it, Mark.